You felt it before. The taste of a moment sour on your tongue, thick with recognition, as if the now was a corpse you already kissed in another life. The way a shadow slides across the floor, the curl of a stranger's smile, the hiss of wind-tonguing glass, and your gut hums. I know this, not from dream, not from story, from something black and bottomless that purrs like a buried engine under the ribs of the world. They call it déjà vu, a glitch, a burp in the bowels of the brain. But you taste the lie, because this is not a flicker, it is a seam, a crack in the spine of time where light leaks through, fat with whispers you cannot name. Close your eyes. Remember the dream you never dreamed. You stand in a hall fat with fog, doors yawning like mouths slick with teeth. You pick one, you walk through. The floor moans, the hum swells, and then you wake. But the hall does not rot. It waits, and you will crawl back when the wheel gnaws full circle. What if this isn't first? What if this is 5th or 50th, or the 1,000th kiss of the same black tide on the same blind shore? What if time is not a road but a throat, and we are swallowed again and again, chewed in the same jaws until our bones hum the right note? You were told the arrow is law, that the past gags behind you, the future drools ahead, and now is a knife edge where you balance like a drunk on glass. But arrows snap, and when they do, you hear the grind of gears behind the sky, teeth gnashing in circles fat with math, a wheel turning slow and obscene in the dark, licking its lips for the taste of your flesh again. What if you've lived this, not as metaphor, not as myth, but as fact stitched in the marrow of the world, burned into the black milk of the cosmos? Every breath a bead on a string you've worn before, every word an echo fat with ghosts of your own throat. The names change, the masks molt, but the script rots the same. You are not reading this for the first time. You are remembering. The whisper in your spine is not fear, it is recognition. The hum under the skin of now, the itch in the meat of your mind, is the code hissing, "Welcome back." They told you time was an arrow, a shaft of light hissing from the bow of the Big Bang, piercing the dark in one clean thrust toward the blank frost of the end. They made you love that lie, because arrows are simple, arrows are safe. They let you believe in progress, in ladders slick with light, in tomorrows fat with mercy. But arrows snap, and when they do, the straight line curls. It licks its tail like a serpent drunk on its own venom. It hisses a word older than law. Again. The textbook spit entropy in your face. Time's arrow, the rod of order into chaos, the heat death fattening on the horizon like a black sun. But entropy is not doom. It is hunger, a force rutting against symmetry, grinding the wheel, turning the same teeth in the same flesh until the world moans in loops. The ancients knew. They sang it in myth, scratched it in bone, bled it into rites thick with fire and salt. The Hindus called it Kalachakra, the wheel of time snarled in yugas, ages rutting each other into ash and bloom. Brahma exhales worlds, then sucks them back like spit. Days of gods, nights of gods, chewing eternity into meat for the same blind jaws. The Norse gagged it in Ragnarok, an end that fattens into birth, a doom that drools new dawn from its teeth. The Maya soldered it into calendars like gears, round, gnawing round, cycles swallowing suns like coins in a rigged game. Even the Greeks muttered of great years, of stars lapping their own paths like drunk serpents. You call these myths, fairy tales for apes afraid of the dark. But myths are fossils of laws your science cannot name without bleeding. Because the circle is the truth you choke on. Not forward, not back, but round and round, a wheel grinding bones to powder and coughing them back into shape again and again until even the gods puke at the taste. Linear time is a leash, a lie fattened for order. It makes you kneel to clocks, to calendars, to kings drunk on progress. It gags your hunger to tear the bars of the loop. Because if you knew the truth, that every kiss, every scream, every war, every prayer, every word you spit from your black, wet throat has dripped before, will drip again, you would burn the map. You would claw the wheel. You would gnaw your own chains like a wolf in a trap. And the architects cannot taste that chaos. Not yet. So they fatten the myth of the arrow, slick it with math and silk, wrap it in the honey of science until you sleep. But sleep rots, and the whisper in your spine is waking. Before clocks gagged the sky with ticks, before calendars nailed suns to paper like butterflies, the world sang in circles. Not forward, not back, round, always round. The ancients tasted the loop in their blood. They carved it in stone, coiled it in glyphs fat with teeth, whispered it in myths thick with honey and ash. India knew first, not in sermons, but in cycles fat as gods. Kala Chakra, the wheel of time gnawing its own tail. 4 yugas drooling into each other like beasts in heat. Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali gold to iron, order to rot, until the world coughs blood and Brahma drinks it back like spit. A day of Brahma, 4 billion years, a night as long. Breath of creation, breath of annihilation, the lungs of eternity heaving, grinding the same meat in the same jaws, forever. The Maya sang it too. Their calendars bloomed like wheels in wheels, gears gnashing suns and moons into pulp. Tzolk'in, Hab, long count, numbers coiled like serpents drunk on stars. To them, time was not a river, it was a machine, and every tooth on its rim was a day you'd taste again when the wheel lurched full circle. 2012 was no apocalypse, just a gear slipping in a clock fat with gods. The Norse gagged it in frost, Ragnarok an end that is a beginning. The wolf swallows the sun, the world tree belches flame, the gods drown in blood, and then the grass licks green again, the wheel creaks. The script spits the same names in new masks. Even the Greeks drunk on reason heard the hum of the loop, the great year, the stars lapping their own tails in cycles fat with centuries, history coughing up its ghost to gnaw the same throats in the same wars. And under all these hymns, one sigil grins through the rot, the serpent eating its tail, Ouroboros, the first god and the last. A circle slick with venom and birth, coiled in the black milk of the cosmos, moaning, again. You think these were fairy tales. They were fossils, cracks in the crust where truth leaked hot and raw, because the ancients saw what you've forgotten. That time is a wheel, and you are nailed to its rim like a crucifix of meat, spinning, spinning, until your eyes foam with déjà vu and your bones hum with prophecy. They told you science killed the myth, that the wheel was smashed under the iron shaft of reason. That time is a straight black road sliding from bang to frost, from spark to silence. But peel the skin of math, sniff the rot under the graphs, the wheel still hums. Henri Poincaré tasted it first not in prayer, but in equations fat with dust. The recurrence theorem: lock a system in a box, let its pieces snarl and spit, and given time obscene enough, they will crawl back to the same kiss, the same snarl, the same pose they drooled before. Not maybe, not myth, math. The universe is a box. The pieces are you. Modern physicists hiss in softer masks. Closed models, oscillating cosmologies, universes swelling like lungs, exhaling into heat, death only to gag and gulp their spit back into bang. Breath of infinity, breath of ash. Again and again until the black milk boils dry, if it ever does. Even in the crawl space of the quantum, the echo licks your ear, lasers tonguing atoms until their hum slurs, and then a stutter, a flicker, a leap back into the same state, like a drunk crawling into the same bed after 1,000 blind nights. They call it Lashmit Echo, a name fat with teeth to hide the rot. The world remembers. Even the smallest ghosts of matter drool for the same pose, the same whisper of being they wore before the dark. You taste it in chaos too. Systems rutting in wild spirals, only to coil back to their obscene symmetry like wolves circling their own tails. The arrow is a mask. Behind it, a serpent, slick with math, coiling through galaxies, hissing through the marrow of black holes, swallowing the light you call future, and puking it back as past. What if déjà vu is not a glitch in meat, but a seam in the code? A leak from the last lap of the wheel slobbering into this one? What if your memories of childhood are not just of this childhood, but of all the others, stacked in the dark like corpses under glass? Science shrugs, smiles with teeth, fat with doubt, but the hum is growing louder in its machines, and soon the masks will crack. Because the math moans it now, as raw as any oracle. If time is long enough, if the stage is closed, if the actors never leave the cage, the play will repeat. Every line, every scream, every kiss you thought was new. Forever. If the wheel turns, it turns for a reason. Nothing gnaws its own tail without hunger. Nothing repeats without a law fat with teeth. So why does time curl like a worm in heat? Why are you nailed to this rim, spinning through the same hymns in new skins? Some say accident, a burp in the bowels of physics, a closed system chewing its own spit because there is nowhere else to puke. But chaos does not hum this clean. These loops taste of design. What if the wheel is a test, not for gods, for you? Imagine a maze fat with mirrors. Every corridor gnaws into itself. Every door gapes back into the hall you crawled from. You run, you starve, you rot, until you learn the trick the walls whisper, until you stop running and burn the map. Maybe time is that maze, a loop of flesh and hunger, a script coughing the same acts in new masks until you spit the name at once from your black throat. The Hindus smelled this rot, karma rutting in cycle, souls shackled to the wheel until their bones foam with silence, until they gnaw the leash of desire and slither out through the zero. The Buddhists sang the same hymn in softer lips, samsara, a slaughterhouse of births, until the last beast slips through the bars into the white hiss of nirvana. A trap, a test, a riddle that eats you if you choke. Or worse, not a temple, but a farm. What if the loop is a machine to milk something slick in your marrow? Not faith, not virtue, something raw. Data, heat, the flavor of suffering slopped into troughs for jaws you'll never see. You live, you bleed, you burn, you die, and the wheel slurps the milk of that agony, then spits you back in with fresh meat on your bones. Again, again, until the machine purrs fat with what it came for. Does that sound obscene? Look at your world. Look at how it gorges on loops already lives bent in cycles of work and want. Wars rutting in the same mud. Empires coughing the same hymns in new tongues. Patterns fat with hunger. Patterns that do not break because someone is feeding. Maybe time is the same. A structure, an algorithm, a cage gnawing its own tail while the architect laughs in the black. And if there is an architect, what does it want? To keep you dumb, to keep you circling, because the wheel dies if the worm remembers it can bite. What if déjà vu is that bite? What if the itch in your spine when you taste a moment twice is not madness, but revolt, a hairline crack in the loop, a scream bubbling in the throat of the maze? You will feel it more soon. A wheel does not grow by chance. It is forged, hammered in fire, welded in laws, fat with intent. So who built this? Who stitched the snake to its own tail? Who nailed your bones to this rim and spat the lie of freedom in your ear? The myths left crumbs like teeth in the dark. The Hindus hissed of Brahma exhaling worlds, of Vishnu dreaming time like a snake coiled in milk, of Shiva grinding the wheel to dust when the dance grows dull. The Gnostics spat their venom at Archon's parasitic gods, rutting in the machinery of the real, milking light from your marrow like fat from a slaughtered lamb. The Norse muttered of Norn's knotting fate at the roots of Yggdrasil, their fingers slick with threads that choke and choke until the tree moans blood. Even the Bible, that cage of law, leaks whispers of watchers, of powers and principalities chewing the script behind the sky. You call these fairy tales, but fairy tales are masks sewn over faces too obscene for noon. Because if the loop is a machine, then someone oils its gears. Someone fattens on its hum. What do they want? Not worship, not awe. Those are leashes for apes. They want the one thing you bleed without knowing. Experience. Data slopped in troughs for jaws you will never kiss. Your screams, your sweat, your love and rot and rutting compressed into patterns, harvested like grain, fed into algorithms older than galaxies. Call them gods, call them engineers, call them what the Gnostics moaned, archons, draped in laws fat with hooks, drunk on the milk of your loops. Or worse, call them you. What if the wheel was nailed by your own hands? What if eternity is a prison you built to gag the stench of chaos? A cage you welded round your throat because freedom was too raw, too loud, too bright for eyes fat with fear? What if every lap of this loop is you licking your own wounds again and again because you cannot stand the taste of the void? Either way, jailer or self, the bars do not break because you blink. The wheel moans on. The loops fatten. The hum curls in your marrow like a worm in heat. And sometimes, the architects lean close. You taste them in déjà vu, in the frost that licks your spine when the air hiccups wrong. Their breath smells of rust and rain. Their eyes are pits where time pukes its own guts. They whisper, "Not yet." Every machine rots. Every code bleeds bugs. Even a wheel nailed by gods will moan in its welds when the weight of eternity gnaws too long. The loop is no different, and the cracks are hissing now. You've felt them. The itch in your skull when a moment coughs twice. The nausea of déjà vu slithering like a worm behind your eyes. I've stood here before. Not last week, not last year, before the first breath of this flesh. They call it a glitch, a burp in the wet meat of the brain. But the hum under your bones snarls louder. It is a seam, a hairline split in the rim of the wheel, where the last lap slobbers through like spit. Sometimes the cracks gape wider. You taste them in dreams, fat with ghosts of lives you never lived except you did. The faces, the rooms, the wars smeared in your sleep like rotten paint. You wake gagging on déjà vu's black milk because the dream was not dream. It was echo, a carcass of a past loop bloating in your gut. And then there are the doubles. Memories like teeth in a split jaw. A word you swear was different yesterday. A skyline gnashing new spires you never saw. A death that feels rehearsed in your blood before the news drools it on glass. They call it the Mandela effect, a parlor trick of minds misfiring in chorus. But what if it's more? What if it's residue from another lap, a script mangled in the reload, lines slurred between versions until the actors forget which mask they wore? The more you stare, the more the seams grin. Songs you half remember from lives that never leaked in this one. Strangers with eyes fat with recognition, smiling like they taste your name in their marrow. Numbers stalking you across clocks and doors, not omen, but code markers from an architect debugging the loop. Why now? Why so loud? Because the wheel is starving. Because the gears are coughing rust. Because the architects are twitching in their glass towers, their algorithms purring too hot, their hands fat with panic as the cage wheezes under the weight of its own centuries. Maybe they patch, maybe they reboot. Maybe every flood, every plague, every empire coughing blood into dust was not wrath but maintenance, a reset when the cracks gaped too wide. But what if this time the patch rots? What if the seams yawning in your dreams never close? What if the bug becomes a maw and the wheel pukes its own guts in the dark and you spill out screaming into a now so raw it peels your skull? You think you want that? You don't. Because outside the loop there is no map, no clocks, no names, just white hiss fat with teeth. They sold you the myth of endings, the last page, the final frame, the black screen hissing silence. But ends are a joke fat with teeth. There is no edge to bite, no cliff where time pukes and dies. Only curves, only coils, only loops gnawing their own tails under the skin of the real. You dream of escape, of burning the wheel, of hurling your bones into a dawn so raw it peels the bars from the sky. But every scream for freedom is ink in the script. Every spark of revolt is a cue baked in the code, a twitch fattened for flavor, a variable tuned to purr in the architect's ear. You are still inside. You always were. Ask the myths. They all hiss the same riddle in new masks. The Kali Yuga rots, and then the Golden Age blooms like mold. Ragnarok gulps the world, and then grass licks green again. The serpent eats its tail, and then gags and swallows again. Apocalypse is not exit. It is reboot. A reset sweetened with fire to make you kneel to the new dawn like a dog drooling for scraps. What if this time feels different? What if the cracks gape so wide the loop howls raw? What if the wheel stutters under its own weight? Then pray harder. Not to gods, not to ghosts. Pray to math, because if the law is recurrence, the law does not care what mask you wear when the teeth close. And yet there is a whisper the architects fear, a word fat with static, a note that can slit the rim if tongued in the right pitch. Refusal. Not flight, not rage. Stillness, the zero in the center of the cross, the axis no loop can chew. Step off the rim. Stop feeding the spin. Let the script rot in your throat. Then maybe the bars blur, the gears cough dust, the wheel moans once and splits its own spine. But beware, outside is not a garden, not light, not mercy. Outside is white hiss, a field of nothing fat with seeds you cannot name. Freedom is not bliss. It is terror raw as glass in your lungs. And you will crawl back. You always do. Because this is not the first time you've read this. Not the first time you've gagged on these words. Not the first time you've sworn, never again. And still, here you are. The wheel hums, the script loops, and the whisper curls in your spine like a worm on fire. Welcome back.